Welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Kason.
This is our continuing Xenogears story analysis series. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started today, little bit of housework on our end. We've been doing this weekly now for how many weeks straight? It's been four, five? I guess by the time this goes up, it'll be like 6.
Oh, yeah, probably.
But it's been going great. However, there have been a lot of people, I say a lot, I guess it feels like a lot to me because anytime someone's like, oh man, what about this? It's like, I get all worried about it. People are asking about, well, what about the Final Fantasy retrospectives and the video essay type videos and that sort of thing? What happened to that? Well, the podcast audience has supported us far more than anyone else. So we are now making the podcast kind of the hero content at this moment, right, for them, because they showed up. Now, that being said, we do, and I am still working on that Final Fantasy retrospective series. I'm really, really working hard on the first episode right now. You can see, if you were here, Kason can see.
I can see it.
I'm in there composing.
Yeah.
I'm doing an orchestration of the prelude that I'm going to use in the introduction sequences when they do the title animations.
Oh, yeah.
So it's going to play this little prelude that I'm creating of my own version of it. So anyways, that work is going on still. But the podcast is a lot of work, particularly for Xenogears. There's tons of research and a lot more editing and things like that going into it. So here's what I've decided to do. We're going to put up a new, I don't know what they call them, a goal, a stretch goal.
Stretch, but it's just kind of
It's called stretch goal on Kickstarter, but like it's a similar concept.
It's just the next milestone.
I think milestone is what they call it. So the next milestone I've set at $3,500 per month. And that's going to be, again, between the two, between the Subscribe Star and the Patreon.
Yeah, between both.
When they both add up to that number, then we will hire an editor who will edit podcast episodes so that I can focus my time on those other types of videos, and you will start to see those more frequently.
Yeah.
It will not be weekly quite yet, but at least once a month you will have like a documentary style, like heavily edited video essay, scripted out, or like a retrospective or something of that nature once a month. So we're still working on those. They just are taking a little longer because this content is now more regular and it takes a lot of work to produce this stuff. So if you have enjoyed the podcast, if you have enjoyed any of our content and you'd like to see more of it, hit us up on Patreon or Subscribestar. We hit that milestone and we'll get an editor so that I can get back to making that stuff a lot more frequently. So put that out there for you guys. Okay. On this episode, we played up to or I guess it was last time, we played up to the point where you get into the castle.
Which is so funny because as soon as the very next few steps you take after the end of our playthrough last time, just some really big stuff happens right away.
And that's why I stopped it right there.
Yeah, it's pretty
So
funny.
we stopped right as soon as you enter the room where
with Margaret,
and there's a save point in there. We said, stop there, don't play further. And we kind of picked a weird spot for the end of this one as well, because there's another really huge thing that comes right on the back of that.
Oh, yeah.
But we played up through Nisan or however you pronounce that. And then the beginning of the sort of like coup that they plan there to get the kingdom of Ave back for Bart. They're going to like take out Shakan. They're going to distract certain forces.
They're going to distract. Apparently there's only 3 units for Ave, and one of them's like just tiny. Yeah. And so they just need to distract one, and it sends the other one out, and then they're free to do whatever they want.
Yeah. So we'll get to that and what that whole plan entails, but that's the point where we played up to for this episode. I keep saying that I'm going to tell you guys in some addendum or something where the next one is going up to, and then I always forget to do that. But I have been pinning it as the pinned comment. So if you just go to the pinned comments, that's where I'm going to plan on telling people from now on, this is where you play up to next time. So if you want to know where to stop for next episode, just check the pinned comment, the very first comment in the comment section from us. Okay, so we grab We grab Marguerite, and
Yep,
she grabs
She grabs the pink dude,
Chu
which is
Chu.
awesome. I don't. Yeah. They didn't know either.
They thought it was just
a stuffed animal.
Stuffed animal. But she grabbed it. Anyways, we'll get into that a little more here in a minute. But as soon as you get out the door, Ramsus and Miang are basically waiting for Bart there.
Yeah, they're right there.
And so, again, it's pretty interesting. I like the way they handle Ramsus. He's like this seemingly kind of more noble guy. Like
Sure,
he's trying to tell them, like, listen, like, we don't want to hurt anybody.
Well, they've shown that he's nice to kids. He doesn't break his own rules to get what he wants. He seems relatively principled.
Yes, principled
in
is a
some
good word.
way, yeah.
Principled more so than maybe.
Yeah. Principled in a way that, like, Anton Sigurd from No Country for Old Men is principled.
Is principled.
Like, he will shoot you in the face, but he's principled.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
So he's principled. He tries to, like, dissuade Bart from doing this. Bart says no way. So you end up having a fight there with Ramsus.
Yeah.
And first round is Bart and Ramsus. This is kind of an interesting battle because it's the first time, I don't remember if it's the only time, because it's been a while since I played the game, but it's at least the first time where you have, like, companion characters that cannot be targeted and you cannot control. So, like, Miang is like aiding Ramsus, and Margie is aiding Bart, but I can't control Margie's actions.
Yeah, that's true.
And I can't target
She just
Miang.
kind of heals you, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's also a ton of dialogue, like, during the battle.
Yes,
It's almost like every exchange of hits you have is like, okay, more words, more talking, okay, exchange a few more hits. It's just
I like it when games do that, when they get into
too.
the battles and then, like, they talk back and forth, and there's kind of like it's almost like a duel, right? So it's like you have like an exchange and then like a reprieve for a second, and then they like talk to each other or like battle wits, and then they go back at it.
That way you're not just watching a cutscene. You're involved, you're engaged, and it's similar to in our last playthrough with Nier, how Grimoire Weiss was always talking to us during battles, and we were having banter and discussions, and it was a good way of giving a little more exposition, a little more of what's going on in the story, without us having to just kind of boringly sit through a bunch of dialogue. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
I was also very pleasantly surprised. I thought for sure, based on the way that he was with, what's the very, not the very bad guy, the murderous coup plotter who runs the desert. Shakan, that guy. The way that Ramsus was with Shakan is, it made me think Ramsus was quite powerful, and that we didn't really stand a chance, right? So as soon as he caught us, I was like, great. This is one of those game moments where you can't win. You're going to fight him. You can't win. He wins.
In the game, lose in the cutscene.
Exactly, lose in the cutscene. And then he takes it back, and our whole plan just failed. And I was pleasantly surprised that was not the case this time.
Yeah, it's actually really cool the way this goes down.
Yeah, I liked it a lot,
So
actually.
after the first round, Faye arrives, like jumps in.
And he like drop kicks him in this interesting way that really takes Ramsus off guard.
Oh yes, it's a move he recognizes, and
Ramsus
this is where
it couldn't be.
We get some really good foreshadowing here, right? So Ramsus recognizes, or believes that he recognizes Faye from somewhere. Yes. And I kind of copied down. He's thinking. I think it's in parentheses, so I think he's thinking this in his mind.
Yeah.
He says he looks completely different, and there's no response. Is it just my imagination? But that technique was indeed his.
And then well, I guess we'll go into what he's talking about later on. But yeah, he looks different. Oh, that was weird to me. The way that he said he looks different. Because when we see flashbacks or throughout all of this, the imagination is telling me that it's Faye's character. It's just him going back. And it was like his younger self. That was kind of what I was thinking with what I was seeing. And there was that cutscene with
it flashes to where
Faye and his father.
Yes.
And there's that red-haired person, didn't know who he was. And there's a weird thing going on here that almost seems to link Faye with that character.
The red-haired guy.
Because Ramsus has kind of a flashback, like a flashback of some red-haired dude like doing these Faye moves, like kicking up and beating
But
up all
like
these people.
barehandedly destroying gears.
Destroying gears with his bare hands. Yeah, something else. Like crazy.
Really powerful.
And so it's like Faye's, I mean, we're not there yet.
Right.
But I guess we're doing some of the similar stuff.
Yeah, so not only that, I don't know if you caught this. This was my first time seeing this. As it comes out of that flashback, and the camera kind of moves back into, because it kind of pulls back a little bit.
Yes.
It moves back in to like the position where it hangs for like the battles. And for a second, that red-haired sprite flashes in front of Faye.
I didn't notice that. I didn't see it.
Let me show it to you just so you've seen it.
Oh, that's
here.
great.
What's more, the name Faye, where have I, and then there's a quick flash to white, and you just see Faye, that's my child's name. And then it comes back in from white, and the camera moves after Ramsus goes, oh, he like realizes, and then you see the red-haired guy
right
flash
before we kick the crap out of him.
in front of Faye, and then Faye finishes him off, right?
That's crazy. So he forgot that he had a son? He forgot the name of his son?
Are you talking about Ramsus?
Yes.
No.
It's weird.
I think
We're fighting for a long time, and he's like, where have I heard the word Faye before? Like, if your son is named Faye, you don't have to think that.
I don't think that, I think he's remembering someone saying my child's name is Faye, not that he himself had a child named Faye.
Oh my gosh.
So it's flashing to white.
Oh, that ruins this whole playthrough for me. I thought that's our dad for
You thought Ramsus was his father?
Yes.
No.
He's got gray hair. He's old. He seems old. He's got gray hair. I don't know. And this whole past like several hours of playing, I was like, oh my gosh, Ramsus is our dad.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh. Well, so how did, aside from you've played this game before, how would you know, based on what we just saw, that he was listening to someone else?
This is something I want to bring up because it's just interesting to me how people can read something so different.
I am really literal. When I read things, I interpret it very literally, and this happens to me a lot, is what I'm saying.
So in our near playthrough, right, I made the assumption that the wolf shade was a fusion of the original owner of the dog and the dog's soul together.
Sure.
And that in that scene where he dies and like the owner's like talking to him,
there.
I interpreted that scene as being a separation in death of the human soul from the dog soul.
Okay.
Right? And based on what I understood about the world of Nier at the time, right? Many shades confused together into bestial forms.
Yes.
So like every other beast form shade that you fought was an amalgamation of human souls, but they were still human.
Right.
Right? This particular instance, that dog is just a dog shade. A shade, or a dog that was turned into a shade, not a human turned into a shade that fused with a dog.
Oh, sure.
So that I interpreted it that way, and there was someone in the comments being like, it's really obvious that it's not that. And it's like, but it isn't, because the scene is actually pretty vague, right? So it's just funny to me that that shot right there, as it flashes, like, I've never thought what you got out of that, but I can see why you did. But it's flashing to white, and my intuition, I guess, was just like, he's remembering a voice. He's remembering someone saying it, but they're not showing it because they don't want to give away who his father is. But you took that as he's remembering, or maybe had retrograde amnesia himself and forgotten.
It literally says, where have I heard that name before? My son's name is Faye, something like that.
Yeah.
How did you not, I don't know. It's interesting. Now there is one thing that when he's talking to himself, it's in parentheses. And then when it flashes to white, there's no parentheses.
Yeah, so it's not thinking.
So it's not him thinking. I can see that now that I know to look for some reason for why that might not be him. Now I can see that maybe, okay, there's no parenthetics, okay. But this has happened to me several times in this game already, where I'm thinking, oh, the guy told me not to go in the desert alone because I might die, but it's like, no, he told us that Citan would die, so we should go in the desert.
Yeah.
And I reread that again, and I misinterpreted. I read it wrong because he says specifically your friend. You let your friend go alone. Like, okay, all right. But I can't remember the others. But there have been several times where I have misinterpreted, very much so, the intention here. Who else out there misinterpreted what we just saw and thought that he was Faye's father? Even for a little bit. You have to admit it, just for a little bit.
We'll see.
I don't know how old he is, but he has gray hair.
Ramsus has gray hair, but don't worry. Like, I don't want you to feel like, oh, shoot, like that's ruined for me. Ramsus'
I have to defend myself.
Ramsus' connection to Faye is still really a really big reveal, and it's still something that's really important to his character arc. Like, Ramsus' feelings towards Faye are still really important.
Okay.
It's just that he's not his dad.
It's just he's not his dad. Yeah, I thought I had this whole game figured out.
Okay. So, you beat him up and you start to, or the party, the weirdest part of this whole scene is like the escape plan, right? When you like get him on his knees and it's like, okay, like now's our chance. And Margie steps up and a bunch of rats come like running in. I was like, I have to be seeing that wrong. That can't be right.
Yeah.
She like unleashes the castle's rats to like distract them so they can run away. Like, what the fetch?
Very powerful. Oh my gosh. You know what though? I have to say, going back. Now this is just me being confused, but I do have a thought.
Real quickly. So real quickly about Ramsus, right? There's some extra dialogue here that I can, now that I'm reading it, maybe I can see even further why that sort of became submitted.
That he was the father?
That's why you thought that?
Yeah.
So Faye, that's my child's name, right? And then we see the that red character essentially like flash in front of him. And then Ramsus says, is it him, in quotations? Same way that Citan referred to, if he emerges here back in Lahan village, right? Oh, is it him, or do I only want to think so? If it is him, I am, and he's getting all nervous.
His father.
No, then it flashes. Then it flashes again. It flashes again.
Yeah.
And it says worthless, a reject.
Yes, because he didn't recognize his own son. I just totally read this wrong. I am worthless. I'm a reject if this is him, because I didn't even recognize him.
Ramsus
right in front of me
is
right there.
Very important. He's like the leading commanding officer of the Gebler.
Yeah.
So he's reached this sort of level or rank.
Yeah.
And so the emergence of Faye is leading him to feel like, if it is him, then I'm worthless. I'm a reject.
That's weird because he thinks very highly of himself.
Yes.
So for him to say that is
feels
something else.
Personally threatened by Faye's, if this is him,
Faye's existence,
then he's threatening my position, he's threatening my existence, he's threatening my value as a person.
Well, and as we learn later, he has a goal. He's trying to, control his people into doing certain things a certain way because of how he was raised and where he came from.
Right.
It's a little bit different. And so somehow Faye kind of gets in the way of his plans or something like that.
Yeah.
I just can't I have to reinterpret it on the fly now because I read it completely wrong.
Don't worry.
That's so funny.
Don't worry. There's a lot more to learn about Ramsus and Faye.
But I did not think that Miang was Faye's mother. I didn't think that at all. But I did think Ramsus was his father.
Okay. So then, Margie with the freaking rats.
Yes, so great.
Okay, whatever.
Oh, but I did have one thing to bring up, though. The red-haired... So in our flashback where we saw our father, and he was like, I'll never let you have him. And then there's the red-haired person, and then there's Graf. We are in that cutscene, and actually, we are there. We are watching this from a distance. Okay. Like, Faye is there watching.
Yes.
He's there.
Okay, but hold up. Now I'm actually further curious. What? So you saw Faye's dad in the scene. I remember now in the last podcast you were like, that's his dad. He's got like the mustache and the dark hair.
Yes.
But how did you think
this threw everything off now?
Him, I guess.
Oh my gosh, you're totally right. But you're right. I don't know how. That's a very good question. I don't know.
Because we saw
I
Faye's
didn't think
dad
that at all.
before.
So I guess I would have done away with that cutscene, and
mind, just
I
like-
would have said, he just said he was his dad. I mean, there's not, like it was clear as day.
The way that the text,
I wasn't questioning anything else.
the way that
I'd
the
seen.
text came out, it just kind of flowed in a way that
Yeah,
made you feel like
but-
Ramsus was.
Yes,
saying
but
that.
at the same time, this is a memory long since past, right? He
Yeah.
didn't even remember his own son's name. So in my mind, it was he had a kid, and then the kid was at a very young age taken away from him. So that who Faye thinks was his dad maybe wasn't his real dad.
Okay.
I mean, that would be a way that I would explain right now, but I actually didn't even think of that before. But it didn't have an issue in my mind because it is clear that Ramsus has not been around Faye for a very, very long time.
Sure.
And so it didn't, it just made sense that if Faye was adopted out earlier, that would have been who he thought was his dad. But even still, he's in there. So this guy is seeing the red-haired guy with Faye, but Faye was seeing the red-haired guy with his dad, and the connection is that Faye in some way is the red-haired guy, but Faye and the red-haired guy were both present in the anime scene where his dad is there. So they're separate, like they're different, and so. But anyways, it does also bring back what Citan said towards the beginning with the music box, where he says that there's somebody else like inside of us. But I don't understand because we were both people at the same time in the same spot, as far as I can tell. So there's something weird there, but somehow
It's coming together.
we like merged.
Slowly but surely.
Somehow we merged together.
Slowly but surely, it's coming together. The pieces. The puzzle is.
They don't feel like they're coming
The
together.
pieces are on the table.
And they're getting further apart. I'm like, in fact, you know what? I just connected two pieces that weren't supposed to go together. And so now I'm like, where does this fit with the rest of the puzzle? But they fit perfectly, but they don't go together.
They don't go together. Like the piece snapped, but it was like the
Yeah,
pictures
the
didn't
jig
align.
cuts were perfect, but the picture, it's the wrong picture, yeah.
Okay, so you run away from a bunch of dudes, soldiers, Gebler people.
Yep, we
and,
get away. We totally
Yeah.
beat Ramsus. Like, he is not as strong as I thought he was.
Yeah.
And he can't keep us there. He even goes and tells his people, he's like, don't let anybody leave, but we're totally like, we're gone.
Yeah. But before we're able to get out, you bump into Elly.
Yeah.
And Bart's very suspicious, like, how do you know this person?
And we do find out later, at least in part of why, he's suspicious of everybody, especially people of Elly's group. But he also says just a little bit later, he says, yeah, I saw like a drug, the drive drug, which we saw in the last episode. He's
In
like,
the
yeah,
room.
it was just right there on the desk. He just says it like nonchalantly,
Yeah.
but it's like, he has many reasons not to trust Elly.
You know,
And among those reasons is that Elly is like, don't trust me. She's like, you're my enemy.
Basically, yeah. She's obviously struggling because
Clearly.
And this kind of goes back to the conversation that Citan and Elly had at the fireside back in the Blackman Forest, right? Where she basically says that she and Faye are the same, right? She even though it comes from this society where they view lambs or surface dwellers as like
inferior,
subhuman or something that, right? She saw that they were the same, that she's not better, than him, and he's a lamb, and so she's having that epiphany, or at least she even mentions that her father had, compassion for surface dwellers.
It kind of
too.
raised her that way.
So she has some of that in her family already, but Citan was, he made a point on that, like that's not common, in your country where you come from, that people can see what you're seeing right now, and so she cares about Faye. She's conflicted about what her country is doing to surface dwellers, or at least the way that they view them and treat them. But at the same time, she's in the military, and military is all about discipline and following orders, and there's very heavy consequences for not doing so.
Although her regiment of troops that she's in charge of,
They don't want to listen to her.
they are the least disciplined, the most like non-militaristic type people in the world.
It's kind of like almost like a special forces or like a certain squad.
Yeah, where
that's,
they're
like,
allowed to be a
specialized.
little more.
And
like
they're
rough.
a little cocky. They're kind of like
Yeah.
elite,
Yeah, because it's like, what? I'm
members or
the
whatever.
best here. What are you gonna do?
And
Demote
she's
me?
young, so like they don't respect her, right? She's younger than all of them.
Yeah.
But anyways, she decides to help. She pulls him into her room and lets him hide. I kind of liked, because I was listening to headphones, how the footsteps outside, it sort of pans from right to left.
I'm using headphones too, and yeah, they're
Just a
they're
nice
using
little,
that pretty heavily.
nice little sound effect to get that
Yeah.
they're moving around outside and they're like listening through the door, and then they're gone and it's like, okay, we can get out now. But there's some really good dialogue in there between Elly and Faye. In fact, let me pull it up because I forgot to copy some of this down. But because Faye more or less reveals that he knows that she was responsible for what happened at Lahan, right? And she's like,
because he's like,
confessing
I
it to him.
listened to you talking to Citan.
Yeah. Okay, it sounds like they've gone. And then Bart, Faye, can you explain to me how you know a Gebler officer? He says, well, and then Bart's like, I don't want to know where you met her, but no matter how you look at it, she's a Gebler officer, not an enemy. Where do you get off saying that? Bart's like really upset.
Yeah.
And then Elly basically reveals, what her rank is and everything. I'm Special Forces of the Sacred Empire of Solaris, also known as Gebler. I'm Lieutenant Elihim van Houten, or Houten.
I would pronounce it Elhaim.
Elheim van Houten of the Ignis Army's 3rd Assault Division. And while returning from a mission to capture the newest model gear from a Kislev military factory, I was attacked by pursuing Kislev gears and crash landed in your village. And Faye is quiet. She says, I wanted to tell you, but I just couldn't bring myself to. When I heard what my crash landing in your village had caused, I couldn't tell you. And that's where Faye says, I knew. And she's like, what? And he says, I overheard you and talking with the doc. So while they were talking at that campsite, he had already revealed that he woken up partway through the conversation or something.
It sounds like
But it sounds like he heard the whole thing.
the whole time, yeah.
And then she's like, well, then why? And he says, it was all my fault, but I lashed out at you with my own feelings. I'm sorry. So this remember, Graf did this too. She and Graf both told him, like, this is typical of you to try to deflect blame.
Yeah, to not accept responsibility for your own actions, right?
Even here, now that he's given the opportunity to accept that the fault was hers, he still takes responsibility himself.
Yeah, that's crazy. That means he's really kind of I wouldn't say he's come to terms with how many people he killed. He clearly hasn't come to terms with that, but he has come to terms with some amount of acceptance of responsibility for his own situation.
Yeah.
Elly's in a similar situation though, and so when he is willing to accept that blame, he in a sense takes that takes the blame from Elly and puts it on himself.
Yeah.
And there's a religious parallel to this, which is Christ taking somebody else's sins and putting them upon himself.
Sure.
But Elly, this makes it so that Elly no longer has the because she's going through similar stuff. She needs to learn to take responsibility herself as well.
Yes.
And he's actually kind of denying her of her being able to grow. So through taking responsibility, Faye has kind of grown a little bit to some extent, and he's matured a little bit. And Elly needs to take responsibility for her part in things too, but Faye is saying, no, it was all my fault, and he's taking that from her, which relieves it from her, but it doesn't help her to grow to the next stage of where she needs to go, which is, being more responsible and coming to terms with what she has done. But Faye doesn't know anything about that yet.
Yeah, because
we've just seen little
we've
glimpses,
seen little snippets of it, and we'll see even more snippets of it a little later.
Pretty horrific.
Yeah.
But she needs to come to terms with it too, but Faye's kind of not letting her, because everyone's taking that hard line against Faye, being like, no, this is your fault, take responsibility. But I don't know that anyone's really doing that to Elly right now to push her to take responsibility other than herself, I guess.
Right. So he says, just forget about it. You couldn't help it. You had your own problems. He's like, and then she asks why he's with Bart. He's like, I'm cooperating with Bart and his crew. We came to rescue Margie, who was taken prisoner in the castle here. She says, I see. And then Bart is like, wait a minute, where do you think you're going? Because she's
going to the door,
You want to get out of the castle, right? In this confusion, you can escape through the launch door. Bart says, great idea, but do we really buy that? Again, he just feels like she's trying to trick him, right? Probably going to turn us over to the bald geezer, which is
like, it's a trick.
Citan. And Margie's like, come on, she's not bad. Like, let her help us. Bart's like, you're so stupid. Why are you guys trusting her? Ultimately, like Faye's like, yeah, I'm gonna trust her, right? He kind of makes the decision. He's like, yeah, a lot of you can jump off a cliff. Bart's like, I don't care. He's kind of pissed.
Yeah.
But she gets them out. She leads them out, gets them into a gear, says you can launch with this and you can escape. And Faye tries to convince her to leave with them. Like, you're not the type of person that's suited for a place like this. He says, come with us. She's like, and this is where she says, thanks, but it's impossible. I'm a Solaris soldier. This is where I belong. I can't go with you. And the next time that we meet, we'll be enemies. And she runs off. And then they escape. Now, this is another really big moment because Ramsus and Miang are still pursuing. They're still trying to catch them, right? So they've got like a regiment there and they're giving them orders. And as Ramsus is about to tell them, like, to send them off to like go chase them, Miang, get my wyvern powered up, right? I must pursue them. So his gear, wyvern, I think is the name of it.
A wyvern, yeah.
And then a soldier runs up to Ramsus and like says something to him. Commander, I have a message from Hugh.
Hugh, which we know from Sigurd.
Is Citan.
Hugh is Citan, yeah.
Because Sigurd called him Hugh or Huga.
Yeah, Huga.
And then Ramsus says, what? Stop the power up. Recall all the men back to the base. Wait for further orders. That fool, what is he doing down here? Ramsus listened to Citan's, I don't know if we want to call it a request or we want to call it an order or a command. It's not entirely clear.
Yes.
But a soldier came with a message from Citan and Ramsus listened to him.
And Ramsus, the highest commander in the...
Listened to Citan.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, and he didn't even question it.
Nope.
He's just like, boom, shut everything down.
And he's like, that fool, he's frustrated by it.
Yes, that I think that was important.
Yeah.
Because at first it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But Ramsus is not happy about this.
Yeah.
So your initial thinking is, oh my gosh, Citan and Ramsus, they're like teamed up. They're working together. But the immediate next reaction from Ramsus is like, that guy's an idiot. I'm so mad right now, right?
Yeah.
But he did it. So there is some level of cooperation or trust, or they know each other, or they used to know each other. Mm-hmm. But Ramsus they're not doing plans together, right? Ramsus does not know what Citan's doing.
Yeah.
But that is very concerning that he just kind of jumps right on it.
Yep, just another
Although,
on the pile.
He's our father, so no, just kidding. He is, he's a conflicted character as well, Ramsus, given the fact that, and it has something to do with us, that's making him really conflicted in what he's seen in the past and what he's seeing right now. And Citan does kind of know some things as well. I don't know. It kind of, honestly, instead of making me think that Citan was bad, it actually made me think Ramsus was not so bad.
Yeah.
Not as bad as we had been introduced to think.
Yes.
And kind of this whole sequence of gameplay up to this point has kind of made me think that. Ramsus is a very developed character.
Sure.
In the very little time we've gotten to know him, he's very conflicted, he's very different.
Yes.
He's very, he's a strong character, I think.
He's a very strong character. He's really, really good. He's one of my favorite characters in the game, actually. A fan favorite, too, I would say.
Oh, really?
But in any case, just add this on to the pile of things Citan has done or said that makes you go like, who is this person?
I know, yeah.
What do you want?
He is like way high up, he has connections in very high places and in very low places.
It makes you always like, I guess the feeling I get, I mean, I know because I've played the game, but like in pretending like I've not played it before, and just reading it at face value and like try to like re-examine what would I think if I didn't know this kind of a thing. It's like there's all these things where I just don't know what to believe.
Yes.
Of what Citan says.
I think that's what they want you to think at this point. That's what the creators of the game, they want you to think, I have no idea what's going on, but I'm intrigued, so I'll continue.
When he talks to us, when he talks to the party, when he talks to anybody, we've seen so many examples of him not quite answering the question fully, or avoiding saying certain things. And so it's like he's very careful about what he reveals to us, but he's clearly high-ranking here, right?
Like
or it appears that way.
Direct communication, and throughout the course of this playthrough, he does finally start answering some questions, which you would expect after a reveal like this.
Yes.
You don't want to hold on to those questions much longer.
An explanation.
You need something quickly, and the game does not wait too long to give you some of those answers.
Yeah.
Luckily.
So we'll get into a little bit of his conversation with Sigurd, but first we got to talk about Chu Chu here. So you get back on the Yggdrasil and you go down the hatch and the bridge door.
This is weird. They're like, this stuffed animal's blocking our way. We can't go past this stuffed animal on the floor. What do we do? Someone else needs to pick it up.
Or just step over it. It's maybe waist high.
Yeah, I do. It's small. It grows when he becomes a person again, but it's tiny. It's this little thing.
It's so weird, man.
That is very strange.
This game is full of like little weird things like that. Like the parts that I feel like I remember, reflecting on the game I played years ago, are like all of these like epic moments and all of the interesting philosophy and just like so like intriguing and interesting and like this kind of tone to what you remember. And then there's like Chu Chu blocks the door to the bridge that they can't
well thought through, was it?
Like why? It's so
weird.
silly. Or like Dan participating in the Ave tournament.
Which, by the way, Bart asks us. Bart's like, hey, how'd the tournament go? And we're like, I guess I won. And that's it. They don't say anything else about the tournament. It's just like, yeah, there's this huge, massive tournament the whole country does every year, and I won. And okay, let's move on, keep going. Yeah. It was like, oh my gosh, that was just another like very lightly glossed over thing. And Bart's like, oh, good job.
Yeah, so anyways, Chu Chu sucks. I hate this character, but they can't get in because Chu Chu's blocking the door. So we got to go talk to Margie so Margie can move this thing for us for some reason. So you go down and talk to Margie. But it kind of
followed us down to Margie, which is kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
Well, my memory is that it just kind of shows up. She doesn't go get it. I could be wrong about that.
I don't know if we ever see this. I can't remember if there's a point where she explains it, but on the wiki page, like the Xenogears wiki page for her, it says that she picked Chu Chu up in like a market or something. Oh. So like one of the Ave markets.
So when she got kidnapped, she had already had Chu Chu with her.
And the Chu Chu was disguising itself as a stuffed animal and was purposefully like not moving. And so Margie thought it was a stuffed animal. And
I was wondering if Margie knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Because she, anyways, when you go talk to Margie, she's like, oh, that's why, she has some really weird line, like, oh, that's why it felt so lukewarm or something like that. And then like Chu Chu like declares its love for Faye.
Yeah, that
like, oh, I said it out loud. The whole scene.
I don't
really
know what
weird.
to make of Chu Chu at the moment, but
make nothing of Chu Chu. But see, here's the thing: is that you can almost entirely ignore this character. I feel I'm telling you to enjoy the game more. Just ignore Chu Chu as much as possible.
Okay.
But I think for me to make sure that I'm seeing everything I can, I kind of have to, when I can, like talk to Chu Chu or try to get the dialogue that Chu Chu says. But anyway.
Well, great.
Like of this character archetype, right? This is the Kina in FF9 or the Kate Sith in FF7.
Yeah, the Jar Jar Binks.
The Jar Jar Binks of Star Wars Episode 1. Right. That's
the Meowth. Reminds me a bit of Meowth.
Meowth from Team Rocket. Or let's see, you've got like Tatsu in Xenoblade Chronicles X, Ricky in Xenoblade Chronicles. Anyways,
I think I've seen some of that. Yeah.
That's that character type, right? Of all of those, they tend to be very hit or miss. It's like you're either going to find this person extremely annoying, and the audience will reject that character, like Jar Jar Binks, or they will fall in love with them and just like, oh, that's such a charming character. For me, Kina almost has that effect.
Yes, Kina's great.
I don't know.
Kina's not overwhelming though. In fact, she's probably she is probably not in the game enough. Actually.
Yeah. I find Kina hilarious.
Me too, very much so.
I think Kina fits within like that sort of world that they've built. where they have hippopotamus people and stuff like that.
Yeah. Although in Xenogears world,
they have demi-humans in this too.
Dolphin people.
We'll talk about that later,
But yeah, that's true. The feeling of Final Fantasy IX was a little bit lended itself towards that. I think also in Star Wars, I feel like R2-D2 or R2-D2 and C-3PO were meant to be that type of character as well together, or maybe just R2 alone. But R2 doesn't like talk much, and so it can't be annoying. R2 can't be annoying.
Well, and R2 is also very useful.
Very much so, that's true.
R2 saves them a lot of times.
He has a little gadget for like everything.
Yeah, and so like I think the key to making this type of character likable, because Jar Jar was always useless.
That's true. He had no point. He had no use.
He never
except he accidentally killed like a bunch of.
Yes, but that felt.
And he also brought down the entire Republic.
That felt unconvincing. Because it was like he's too dumb, and he's also by accident doing all of this. How could he have been a
senator? I just don't. Anyways,
right?
Yes,
he's by accident pulling all this stuff, and it's like, oh, that's annoying.
Yes.
But if Jar Jar wasn't just a complete idiot all the time,
if he was good at something,
some things where he could actually offer
just like one thing,
something, then I think that would go a long way towards making him a more likable character.
I think that's a good point with R2-D2 there. That
and so R2 is very useful. And so, for that reason, you like him.
Do you do battle with Chu Chu? Does Chu Chu fight?
Oh, Chu Chu can fight in your party.
Oh,
you can bring him. You can bring her along.
Maybe that's the difference with Kina. All right, well, we'll see. We'll see as the game goes. See how this works.
You'll see. You'll see more. But anyways, this scene's really silly. I just kind of gloss over it because I don't like it.
Yeah.
So you go back to the bridge, and Sigurd is there, and he starts to kind of explain a little bit about what he knows about Ramsus, right? And this becomes an issue for Bart later. Like you were saying, Bart is in this position where he feels like, how do I trust anyone at this point?
Yes,
even my own people.
Once we learn about Sigurd, that throws Bart's world into a weird place.
It's like even my own people are withholding information from me, and like I feel like I'm the one out of the loop on everything, and everyone else knows stuff. So
at the same time, Bart is very young.
Yeah.
So, but I guess that's how young people feel.
So Sigurd is explaining who Ramsus is to them. He says, it seems that Gebler isn't just after the excavation sites found around Ave after all, right? Not just the gear that the Jasper unlocks, right? The treasure, the Fatima treasure. It looks like Gebler's not only after that, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
And then Bart says, you mean they're not after the Jasper? And Sigurd says, if that's their only goal, they wouldn't need to send an important man like him. So they wouldn't need to send Ramsus if the only thing they were after here was the Jasper and the gear that we suppose the Jasper unlocks. So he's hinting at the fact that they want something more if they're going to send someone like Ramsus. So that's just kind of the catalyst for Bart's beginnings of distrusting Sigurd. It's like, how do you even know who Ramsus is?
Yeah. and once he finds out how they know, it's not helpful to Bart.
Yeah.
Bart just gets up and leaves. We'll get to that later. But Bart is not. He doesn't feel like he knows because this was a thing. He says, Sigurd, I've known you my whole life.
Yeah.
Like ever since I was little. Like how did this never come up?
Yeah. Exactly. Like, why did you hold this from me for so long?
Yeah.
But then there's another scene when Citan finally gets back. Like he was
and we
gone
didn't
for a
know.
while.
We were like, how did Citan get back? It was like a really weird kind of thing. And we were eavesdropping on this one.
Yeah,
so
Faye's
Citan
kind of
was
watching from
more.
the top of the stairs.
Yes.
And but this conversation is filled with good stuff.
Yeah.
So Sigurd starts the conversation. He says, now I see why you came down to the surface. To Citan. Now I see why you came down to the surface. And
now this is important for me because throughout this game, they don't hint at what exactly is going on here. So when people talk about going to the surface, my thinking was that they were beneath the surface. My thinking was not that they were above, right? So
you thought they were underground.
I thought they were underground. And I think I even mentioned that in a couple podcasts where I said, there's some people underground, and then there's the above ground people, the surface people. So it seems as though the surface dwellers it's the people who are above the surface dwellers, or the up in the sky. They're not underground, because he says go down to the surface. But that was the first time that I had thought that they weren't like underground.
Yeah. So like I guess it would depend on what you'd seen. Aside from seeing the floating
but I didn't
UFO-looking city thing floating above. Yeah. Aside from that, there's only that optional piece of dialogue with the guy at the carnival who talks about all of his research into the people in the flying thing.
And that was fine. I even still thought those were a separate people.
Like a separate group
I thought that
people.
was like a separate, like, oh, those are the gods, those are the aliens, those are the angels, those are, and then the Jugend people are underground, and then we're on the surface. I had a way of kind of separating it in my mind, but they are, it seems like they are one of the same.
Yeah, one of the same.
Yeah, and so Sigurd and Citan were both
from Solaris,
from this city in the clouds or something like that, up in the sky or possibly beyond that. But
so he says, now I see why he came down to the surface. All right, I understand you, but Charon Ramsus taking over the post of Ave is pretty annoying. So they're worried. Sigurd in particular is worried about the fact that Ramsus is here.
Yeah.
And so Citan says the home country might have some special reasons. And Sigurd says, yeah, obviously. And then Citan says, perhaps there's still a chance of success. You and I, who used to be called elements at the commander's training school Jugend, are both here. Now this is one of the most blatant as you know dialogue examples
As you know, we both went to this school and were called this name, yeah.
Like remember how we went to Jugend and we were elements once?
It's like, yeah, I remember.
Of course.
we who are elements, yeah.
Anyways, that line is written for the audience's sake only. So what it's essentially the reveal that Citan and Sigurd were both from that same Jugend military academy that Elly comes from.
Right, because she went from Jugend as well.
Right.
So I guess I assumed they were, but now you're bringing up there might actually be multiple Jugens.
No, there's only one.
Okay, well, then they are
from the same one.
Okay, I thought that, but I just thought it sounded like maybe there could have been multiple. But
yeah, so they come from that same military academy. They trained and they became what are called elements. Mm-hmm. They don't give too much of an explanation of what elements are at this time. We'll see this more later on, but for now you can just assume that's a pretty elite level designation to become an element.
It seems
in the Gebler force is like
a foundational.
You're like top notch warrior material at that level, right? And then Sigurd says, "I hope you're right." And then Citan says, "By the way, she is still," and kind of lingers on that. And then Sigurd says, according to Faye, there was a female aide on Kar's side, and he said that she had indigo blue eyes and hair, so it must be her. So they're concerned about Miang. So it's not just Ramsus that they're worried about, they're also something about Miang that they're like, yeah, she's here too. And Faye described that she had this indigo blue hair or purple hair.
Miang's just kind of hanging in the background, it seems, at the moment.
At the moment, Miang is like there was that one shot where Ramsus really came down on Vanderkam or whatever, and then he's walking with Shakan, and Miang sort of remained behind a little bit to talk to him, and then she caught up to them.
Caught up later.
But she seems to be observing, but we do get another clue here that she has something that she's plotting herself when she talks to Graf.
Yes,
a little bit
in
later
this playthrough we did get clued into something.
Because Graf is kind of pissed that she's getting involved too.
Stay out of my plans.
So you have,
and she's like, hey, I'm
Graf's pissed that she's here. Citan and Sigurd are worried that she's here.
And then Ramsus probably has some, although it seems like they're in a relationship, and that's why they're together at the moment. But
so they're worried about her.
Yeah.
Citan says, so all the old Elements members are on the surface world now.
Okay, and this is what I had got from this, was that there are four elements at the place, and all four of them are here. There are,
but he does say former.
Earth, wind, fire, water. There are the four elements of
not former, but all the old Elements members are on the surface now. I think you could read that as former. Would probably be more correct.
Katsute no elemento. So if I look at katsute, that means once. So it would be former.
Yeah,
it would be once. The once, the former.
That's what I thought.
Not old.
Because it makes more sense. It makes more sense, and it makes it clearer. All the former Elements members are on the surface now.
Would there only be one element at a time?
No, there's 4 elements at a time.
But, well, okay, sure, I got you. But like...
There's 1 element team at a time. It's like a team of 4.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the former 4 element members are now all on the surface.
Okay.
And we know 3 of them, Sigurd, Ramsus, and Citan.
Yeah.
We don't know the 4th right now, but that person is also on the surface.
But they did suggest somebody. I actually had a different thought there. So does that mean that there are 4 current elements?
Yes.
So there were the formers, and
Yes.
then now there's currents.
There's a different group
so
of 4
there are
elements.
essentially like 8 elements now.
Yeah.
Okay.
But these are like,
interesting.
they're like,
Okay.
I don't know what you call them. Like, he's not, like Ramsus is not designated as an element anymore. Now
He's former and
chief
now.
commander or whatever of Gebler. But
Cool.
so there's 4 elements. We
Okay.
will meet these characters many times later.
Great.
So anyways. But Citan and Sigurd and Ramsus used to be elements. So then Sigurd says, I guess so, Huga. To be honest with you, she scares me. And he's talking about Miang there. She supports Carr and is kind to anyone. I know that very well, but sometimes I felt a strange fear in her. That bothers me more than Carr being in this land. So he's more concerned about Miang than he is about Ramsus. And he's concerned about Ramsus. He's very concerned about Ramsus. And Citan says, that cannot be true, not in her. And Sigurd says, yeah, I don't want to believe it either, but don't you remember how I could always sense these things quite accurately?
That was good.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny line. It's strange the way it's written, right?
One thing here, I think I need to read slower and more carefully. I thought they were talking about Elly this whole time, not Miang.
Not Miang.
When they said there's a woman, yeah, they mentioned somebody helped them escape. Is that right?
No, I don't think they said that.
Okay, may not have said that, but they mentioned that somebody was there when they escaped. Is that or something more or less? It would be right in this conversation.
I don't think it's in this conversation, but I do think I kind of remember that. Because he says,
according to Faye, there was a female aide
on Carr's side,
but when it says aide,
with indigo blue eyes and hair.
Yeah, but and hair. I thought they missed a word there. I couldn't remember at least eye color, but I was like, okay. But here's the thing. According to Faye, there was a female aide on Car's side. Yeah. So a female aided us, but was on Car's side. Oh, that's Elly.
Oh, yeah. No, there's
now.
Aide is probably the wrong word. It's like a subordinate
advisor
or advisor
or freaking like wife. I don't know. Like I don't know what's going on between them. It seems like they sleep in the same bed, not wearing clothes
they're
together.
in a relationship, but they're
very
not
much
married.
so. Okay, girlfriend, something, whatever. But when it says there was a female aide, and then they're like, "Oh, she's nice to everyone." I'm sorry.
You're reading that as Elly.
I thought this was Elly. I thought they were referring to Elly through this entire conversation. I did not get that it was Miang.
Yeah. So it's just the indigo blue eyes and hair thing.
Yeah. So the idea is indigo blue eyes and indigo blue hair. That's the idea.
Indigo blue eyes, and she also had hair.
Yes.
Indiscriminate. We're not talking about the color there. Just she also had hair.
No, I don't know why. I brushed. I'm sorry. I brush this stuff off because I read it and I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. Next. Like, I just don't, because here, this is maybe one of the problems of a game when people say, oh, a game the translation wasn't done thoroughly and properly, you end up with mistakes that aren't mistakes, but that the reader might think are mistakes and hit next and keep going. So for me, that's because up to this point, the dialogue has, for the most part, been great, and I'm not knocking Richard Honeywood or anything, but it's been weird at parts, and often I will just be like, oh, that's weird, and not think anything. Once my head says, oh, that's weird, but, dialogue, translation, not so good, I end up brushing things like this off as like, oh, that's weird, they didn't mention red hair, oh, okay, whatever, and then just next, right? I don't think... And also, indigo is kind of like a purplish color, and Miang is more like, I describe it more like blue. And so
she has purple hair, I would say.
Okay.
I thought it was weird that they described it as indigo blue, because I was like, her hair is fetching purple.
But. Oh, I thought it was blue. Maybe there's a difference in the
Hold
version
on, let's
we're
take
playing.
a look at Miang.
But
Xenogears.
Okay, it might be purple, but even still, indigo kind of could be like a reddish. It's like purple, I know that, but it didn't seem that off for me. To have assumed. I mean, that's purple, but it's very blue. It's purple blue.
It's indigo blue.
It's not the same color as their eyes.
Let me look at her eyes there. Yeah, her eyes just look blue.
Here's what they should have said: blue eyes and indigo hair. That maybe would have made me rethink it. But when they said indigo blue eyes and hair, and knowing that the translation's been shaky this whole game, I wasn't able to catch things that I ought to have caught.
Yeah.
And then they go on to say things that are very indicative of Elly.
Yeah.
That she's very kind, and I'm worried about her, and she's here too. Oh no, that's weird. And we know Elly went to Jugend, and so, but she's here too.
Yeah.
It just all kind of worked with Elly and not Miang. I don't want to talk about this too long because I'm wrong, but I feel like there's something to. I didn't have these problems as much in the first few playthroughs. In this playthrough, I'm misinterpreting things left and right.
The other games that we played?
No, with the other
parts.
This game with other parts. Now, there's been parts where I'm like, oh, I thought they were saying something else or whatever. It's happened so far, almost every section that we've gone through here, and I feel like the reason is that I'm not reading carefully enough, and because the translation is
not great.
I'm skipping things I ought not skip.
Okay,
I don't
actually
know what to.
I actually think that you shouldn't feel too bad about that, because I have continued to say I didn't remember that this was revealed or that this seemed so obvious, because I think that what you're saying, there's a lot of truth to what you're saying.
No.
There is something funky enough about the way people talk at times that make you get confused and go, well, I don't get it, whatever.
And you don't have
explain
time
it later.
to just look exactly.
I'm sure that I'll get this if I just keep going, kind of a thing. I think that maybe that happens at spots, and it can. The game is so dense with information,
and there's a lot of reading,
and a lot of names to remember, and a lot of not even just names of people,
multiple
but of places, and
some people have multiple names,
factions, and people have multiple names, like Hugh and Citan. There's a lot happening, and so at any point, if you're feeling overwhelmed, and there's a line, because there's been at least, while I'm playing with the patrons, right, like 4 or 5 times where I've stopped on a sentence and be like, let me reread that again, and trying to piece, okay, I think, okay, yeah, I get it now. There's enough points where the dialogue is still a little stunted or just not written very well, and I can see that being something that can create a lot of confusion, especially for 10-year-olds playing this in 1998.
Oh my gosh. Not to mention someone who's however old I am.
Well, I mean, in 1998 when it came out.
Yes,
so
for sure.
That's the age we were, 10, 12 at the time or whatever.
Yeah, so that would confuse them. I'm just saying, even now at my age, this being the first time I played the game, it's still confusing. It's still confusing for me.
Right.
But I guess it's kind of meant to be confusing, but I don't think it was meant to be confusing in this way.
Yeah.
I think I was supposed to know it was Miang, but they didn't say her name. And so I just kind of, started thinking something else.
So anyways, they're worried about Miang. And Sigurd is mentioning some kind of ability to be able to sense things. So let's take a look at that part again, knowing they're talking about Miang.
Right, Sigurd's like, I have a good, or I can feel things accurately.
He says, to be honest with you, she scares me. She supports Carr and is kind to anyone. I know that very well, but sometimes I felt a strange fear in her, in Miang. That bothers me more than Carr being in this land. And then Citan's like, no, that can't be true. Not in her, right? So this is vague. This is vague, but he's talking about the fact that he senses some kind of fear in Miang.
And Citan's like, she's not scared of anything.
Maybe. It's
like she's not afraid.
They're clearly trying to be vague around what it is about her that Sigurd is sensing and is worried about.
But clearly they're like, no, but it can't be.
Whatever
Which
it
is the way that Ramsus was talking about us. No, it can't be. Could it be?
Yes.
Like time of the gospel kind of stuff. Where it's like, it's weird enough, we don't get it, but they're thinking of something that's supposed to happen.
Yes.
But they don't know who it's going to happen to, I guess.
Yes.
And whatever it is.
And the fact that Sigurd seems to feel like he has an extrasensory ability to sense this kind of thing.
No.
I'll put it that way.
Well, if he says, I felt a strange fear in her, does that mean that he felt the fear, like I'm afraid of what I felt within her, or I feel that she's afraid of something else that's
I don't want to take what we have clearly demonstrated. What we've clearly demonstrated is a faulty at many points translation and read too much into a word like fear. Maybe you can look at what it says in Japanese instead of fear.
I suppose.
But I'm just going to say he senses something about her. And Sigurd mentions this a little bit in the scene that's coming up too. He has this sort of extrasensory ability to sense things. And this is why Solaris took interest in him and they did experiments on it. He has this sensory ability outside of the normal senses.
Okay.
So I don't know what the word they use in Japanese for fear is, but what I'm saying is he senses something about her, and Citan doesn't seem to want to believe that it's possible.
Okay, hold on. This is interesting. だから俺は彼女に何か得体の知れぬ恐怖を感じることがあったんだ. So I feel a 恐怖, and 恐怖 means fear. But this is saying, so I, as for me, towards the girl, 俺は, that means I am the subject of this. So me to the woman feel fear.
So he's feeling
fear about the woman.
Okay, that makes way more sense.
So the woman doesn't have fear. The person who has fear is Sigurd, who's like, I have some weird fear about her.
Instead of saying, sometimes I felt a strange fear in her, he should say, sometimes I have felt a strange fear about her.
I think about would make sense.
Yes.
Because the way it's written, it sounds like she's the one who's afraid, but he's fearing about something about her.
Which makes a million times more
sense.
Makes
way more sense. Way more clear in the Japanese. But Citan is denying it. And it makes more sense that he would deny it. Because, well, like I mentioned before, I'm like, is Citan saying no, she's not afraid of anything?
Yes.
Well, that would mean she's like an android or something.
What it is you're sensing cannot be true about her, is what Citan is saying.
Yes.
And then
so
Sigurd's
what
like,
you're afraid of.
But I don't want to believe that either, but you remember that I'm pretty good at sensing these things accurately, right?
Yes, so it was his sense of the fear. So that hammers it home. That's amazing. This Citan, all makes way more sense now.
And then Citan says, right. And then Sigurd is, I don't want him to worry until we know exactly what Solaris' objectives are. He's talking about Bart there. I don't want Bart to worry.
Him to worry. Sure.
But I have to tell him eventually, though. Anyway, Hugo, have you gotten any information? And Citan says, not really. I left there before getting into the center section.
And I don't believe Citan. Anytime someone asks him for information and he goes, I don't have any info, actually. Sorry, I don't know. I just know everything in the world. But what you want to know, I don't have that.
It's a pretty good clue that he's probably just hiding information.
Yes, he's hiding from everyone, but he's collecting from everyone. And usually that signals an alarm in people that like, oh, this guy's a spy or something. But he's collecting info the way that, people with nefarious purposes do. But I don't believe, and I would hold even through this playthrough, Citan I still think has some noble purpose. But that's what I think so far at the moment.
Okay, and then at that point they decide to go to Nisan or Nisan.
Yes, but I have one thing here because this is hilarious. This is more a more comical anecdote. But Bart Bart shows up because we're kind of eavesdropping in on the conversation.
Oh, right.
And we're just like, what in the world's going on? Like Citan and Sigurd are having a very strange conversation about things that are way over our head, but that's weird. We didn't know this about Citan. We didn't know this about Sigurd. Bart shows up and he's like, hey, Faye. And we're like, shut up. Stop it, Bart. And he goes, sorry, Dari. Sorry, Dari. What did you think when you read that?
As soon as what came to mind is Dilly Dally Shilly Shally.
Yes, there you go, from Advent Children. So what he says in Japanese is suman, 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 which suman is short for sumanai, which is short for sumimasen, which just means sorry or excuse me. It's a normal thing to say. Suman, suman. It's very rude or it's very informal. As it relates to saying sorry, suman, suman, suman is a relatively normal thing for in an informal setting. Yeah. Sorry, Dari is not someone anyone says ever. And so I have to take qualms with this translation.
Yeah, it's a weird.
Because it's like, while the Japanese is a relatively normal thing to say, the English, and I don't know, anybody from Australia out there who maybe has some insight, do they say sorry, Dari in Australia?
I've never heard that.
You would never take suman and translate it to sorry, Dari. You would never do that. And I understand Honeywood's what I mentioned last time, where he's got the formal and informal, and he's trying to show us without saying it out, that this is informal. Yeah, but I really
didn't like that.
Don't
choice.
Like it. Yeah. I don't like that choice. Sorry, Dari.
I've never heard anyone say sorry, Dari before.
In my freaking life.
Never.
Yeah.
This might be the one instance in all of human history where someone has written or uttered the word sorry.
Sorry, Dari.
Ever. Unless we're completely wrong and there's like a whole freaking...
That's what I'm saying. Is this an Australian thing because he's from Sydney?
That's a good point.
I don't
He's
think
from
so.
Australia.
He is from there. They say some words differently, but really not much.
I mean, I'm not necessarily inundated in Australian media, but I feel like I've seen a lot of Australian...
You've seen Crocodile Dundee, right? Did he say sorry, Dari?
No.
I'm just joking.
I've seen some Australian stuff. Never heard him say that before.
Yeah,
but
it's a weird thing to say, but in the Japanese, it's not weird at all. So, anyways.
So, they go to Nisan because they're going to take Margie back because she's like the mother of the whole sect.
Bart called her the Great Mother, something like that.
Yeah, I guess it's an inherited title, kind of like a king.
Because she's young. She's like really young. Right?
Like
How old is she, do you think?
She's a couple years younger than Bart. I'd say she's 16.
Okay.
So he's 18, she's 16.
Okay, sure.
She looks a freaking lot younger than that.
She looks like 10.
She looks 10.
She looks quite
this
young.
is a Japanese RPG, and that's how they roll.
Sure.
But I think she's 16. Okay. So
she's wearing baggy clothes, so it's kind of hard to tell her figure, I guess. Yeah.
So she is the holy mother of the Nisan sect, of the whole church, basically.
So does that mean she's like the spiritual leader, or is she like the administrative leader? Does she administrate?
I would think, well, maybe the title is both, but I would think at least the spiritual leader.
That seems probable, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at least that, but I would think probably both. It seems that Mother Agnes or Sister Agnes is someone who's sort of
probably administrates,
trying to like train her into the role.
I see. Okay.
Right. Okay. She's like trying to like prepare her to become that. And in the meantime, she's probably the one running things at the moment. Yeah. But training Margie to pass that role on to her because she's the heir of that role, right?
Yeah.
So they take her there. And so we kind of stop off. Nisan's an interesting little town.
Yeah, it's cool. It's not quite as cool as I thought it was going to be, given what, I want to say Bledavik, but what's the city called?
Bledavik.
Bledavik, okay.
The main capital of Ave.
Yeah. I was so blown away by that city.
It's a cool town.
And this has a similar thing where there's multiple instances, and it's kind of, you go up into like a central place, but then there's the, roundabout area. By the way, this city looks similar to Atlantis, like in the general design, given the ring of water around it.
Right.
And then the city, and then the sepulcher type thing, the whatever it is in the very middle. It gives me kind of an Atlantis kind of feel.
Yeah. So there's a couple things you can do in the town and people you can talk to. One kind of interesting, there's like a house you go into and it's just like a bunch of artists and paintings and things like that.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And
that's right.
You can go talk to guys like, oh, well, you're an artist too? And Faye's like, no,
yeah,
not.
Why? I wonder why he
like,
said no.
On the table next to it, he sort of notices some like tools, like paintbrushes and things. He's like, man, it's been a while since I've like painted.
Yeah.
But he's kind of just like playing off the fact that he's an artist himself.
Yeah, it almost seems to me like he's left his former life behind. Like he's come to a point where he's like, I no longer do what I used to do. I'm not that person
with
anymore.
That person.
Yeah. Partly because he doesn't want to be that person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of like his a big step for the character in the last episode we talked about was when he decided like, I don't know what my path is, but I'm going to find it in going with you and helping people. And I think you're the right people to do that. And so he's kind of concentrating now on what's my new purpose in life, and he's not really thinking about who he used to be or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So, anyways, lots of interesting NPC dialogue. There is like a town hall meeting happening, and it's like the elders of the town are kind of gathering, and it's actually a really good scene where they're all concerned because it's like, okay, Margie's back, Bartholomew is alive. Mm-hmm. What are we going to do about this? Because Shakan's going to be pissed that they escaped.
Nisan is like neutral. They remain relatively neutral in the war.
They're not engaged in the Kislev-Ave war.
Yeah, okay.
And so it's like, what do we do? Like, they're going to come here.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to be involved in some way. What side do we take? What action do we take? There's a lot of deliberation between different people there who have a lot of different concerns. It's all pretty well written, and it's all very convincing as to like what realistically would be the concerns of Nisan in this situation.
Yep.
And Bart's kind of overhearing this, and he's like, "Yo, let's not tell Margie about anything you just heard. I'd like her to like have a happiness for a little bit longer and be reunited with the sisters at the church and not worry about the fact that her arrival here has now compromised Nisan." Let's not tell her that.
Kidnapped on purpose, or for a reason, right?
Yeah, it's a good scene. It's a really good scene, and it kind of just keeps that lingering. It's like a lingering doom on the mind as like as you're doing all this. It's like, but at the same time, like we escaped. It's like we felt successful at having completed what we intended to do there, but we might have just doomed Nisan at the same time. Yeah,
it's like everywhere Faye goes, he's kind of bringing some negative energy there.
Yeah, for sure.
One way or another.
So anyways, as usual, talk to everybody, go see as much as you can.
Yeah, it's a cool town. It's just not quite as things to do ridden as Bledavik.
But what I really love here is when you actually get to the cathedral.
Oh my gosh, beautiful! My gosh, this is like pixel art. Well, it's 3D, but still, like it is exquisite. It is so good.
Really, one of my favorite, again, architectural pieces in the game. I really like Citan's house.
Oh yeah,
it's a really cool design. But this cathedral is really, really cool. So you have like the sisters there who are like singing, and so the music that's playing is diegetic. It's like they're singing a hymn, and you hear a choir singing, and then as soon as Margie walks in, they stop, and then they come running to greet her, like, "Oh, Sister Margie's back!"
That part was cool. That part was great.
And a lot of warmth in the conversation there between the sisters, and really, really liked that. Just a really nice little scene there. Sister Agnes. Just so happy that she's back, and Margie's like, "This is weird. You're supposed to be scolding me,
tell me what to do,
correcting me. This is not normal. I need you to like scold me to feel normal." That was touching.
And at the very end, as they're leaving, Agnes does tell her one thing.
Yeah, and she's like, "That's the Agnes."
And she's like, "There we go. Like, hey, get on, like, get dressed or something." I can't remember.
Yeah. So, anyways, Margie's like, "Hey, let me show you around." So you kind of follow her up to the second floor, the landing up there. And I think Citan puts it really well here in describing the beauty, because we're talking about how cool the cathedral is.
Yes.
He says, "Yes, this is breathtaking. Light from outside shining through the stained glass of the cathedral's front. What a brilliant piece of artistry this is." And that's how I felt from the second, because a lot of cool camera moves as they looked through that paned glass and the beams of light coming down into the center.
Which they literally 3D modeled, like a beam going down.
Yeah.
Because I guess you couldn't do it any other way.
They probably don't have any real-time lighting on it.
Yeah, if you walk into it, it's kind of funny, but
yeah, it's probably like a transparent polygonal model.
Yeah, just a bunch of cylindrical thing. Yeah.
Anyways,
it was good. That was cool.
Really, really cool. And then, of course, you have the statues that are like the featured symbol there on kind of the, what do you call it? What do they call it? The pulpit area?
Pulpit, altar,
Altar,
yeah. And above it. They're suspended above it,
Right. So they go up to the top, and this is where Margie starts to explain the symbolism of those statues. Now, before we can break down this dialogue, this is the right time, I feel, to bring up Carl Jung's influence on Xenogears.
Sure. I started feeling it when Citan started talking, and he was like, this is Nisan's, like, this symbolizes the whole ideology in one image,
Right.
Yeah.
So lock in here for a second and stay with me.
Okay.
We're going to talk for a little bit here about Carl Jung and some of the things, like some of his theories and what he was known for, why he was such an influential figure in psychology.
Yeah.
It's going to take a little bit, but like it's all important groundwork and context to sort of understand the pinnacle, central, thematic message of Xenogears. This is it. This symbol of the two angel figures and what Carl Jung's theories that Takashi and Saga were reading and talking about at the time, this is what they took from him and inserted into the game as their core message. This is what Xenogears is about. So I feel it's justified to elaborate a little bit.
Fair enough.
So Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. Well, he was more a psychoanalyst earlier on in his career, but he sort of broke away from Freud a little bit.
Yes, or it was particularly over the ego, I think. They had differences in what the ego was and what it meant.
Right.
Yeah. I think Carl Jung ended up winning out because I think most people will, when they talk about my ego or inflating your ego, I think they're typically talking about Jung's definition, not Freud's.
And so Jung founded a field called analytical psychology. And essentially, his theories within that field diverged from Freudian psychoanalysis. So for many years, the two had corresponded and collaborated and worked together. And in a lot of ways, Freud was hoping that Jung would be like his protege. Would sort of like carry the torch on from him. But it didn't end up working out that way. And as they began to disagree more and more, there was a schism in their relationship. It became fractured. Freud did not have a lot of kind things to say about Jung later on. They both felt like the other person could not admit when they were wrong, which is typical of highly educated intellectuals.
Sure.
You tend to get a form of pride. And it does become difficult for those people to admit they're wrong. They become really, especially when they're developing like a new science or a new field, and they become very attached, and like their legacy is attached to these ideas. And so it's like there's kind of an inherent bias in that where you can't
their ideas
be
have to
wrong
win
because your legacy will be diminished. So analytical psychology, the field that Jung sort of invented, I guess. It's a theory of the mind that emphasizes the importance of wholeness for each individual, but it also stresses these sort of cultural archetypes. And this is related to the collective unconscious, which we'll get into in a minute. But that there's these symbols or these universal archetypes across all of humanity that play a large role or a part in each individual's sort of like psychological development. If that sounded like a lot of like, what are you talking about? Don't worry, I will explain it. But I'm trying to like put it in the simplest terms I can at the start. So some of the major concepts and contributions that analytical psychology has brought to us today, like some of the things you'll probably recognize, the terms you'll probably recognize if you've studied psychology, even or some of these things you don't even have to have done that. So the collective unconscious, what I just talked about, I'll get into that a lot more in a minute. Individuation, synchronicity, archetypes, the persona and the shadow, the anima and animus. Now this is the key thing, the most important. Put a huge red circle around anima and animus. This is huge for Xenogears. Huge to understand the purpose of the story. But also, introversion and extroversion. Those terms, they came from Jung. And we use those all the time, right? Everyone knows about introversion and extroversion. It's like a thing everyone knows about. Everyone accepts that. That
was part, because Jung was all about taking, the opposites, the duality of man, right? You've got the conflicting parts of humans that are always at odds.
And there's a lot of that in Xenogears. There's a lot of opposites and but also the Myers-Briggs type indicator. So the personality Myers-Briggs thing that Breezy's all into. That is something that came from analytical psychology, that came from
that makes sense.
Jung. I don't know if Jung, Myers-Briggs, those are the names of the scientists the psychologists who came up with it, I think. But they were of the same field.
The influence there, okay, gotcha.
Okay, so let's talk about what the unconscious mind means, right? So the unconscious mind is more or less like a pool or a reservoir of feelings and thoughts and memories and urges that are not within your conscious awareness, but that influence your behavior. A lot of people probably refer to this as the subconscious mind, right?
Yes.
So it's like there's something that's like, even though you consciously are not thinking that or whatever, there's just something about you that kind of like nudges your behavior in a certain way. This is classified as the unconscious mind, right?
Sure. Jung takes that, because Jung didn't love the id, superego, and then the ego chooses between the two. It didn't like that kind of structure, so he just said, no, it's just your subconscious, then you're kind of conscious, and then you're total conscious, right? And so he just kind of structured it in kind of like a linear...
Yeah, like 3 levels.
Yeah, instead of the way Freud had it.
The unconscious part is the biggest part.
Yes.
They kind of get smaller as they
drives
go on.
like 90% of what you do is...
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
But this would be comparable to what Freud called the id, right?
Right. And so when he talks about collective unconscious, right, this is the really interesting thing. He's talking about part of your unconscious mind, your personal unconscious mind, that is like connected to or is derived from like ancestral memory.
Yes.
Right? So for those of you who played the Assassin's Creed series, the machine that Desmond Miles gets into is called the Animus.
Yeah. Oh, I never made that connection. The
machine is called the Animus, and it allows you to access
great.
the memories of your ancestors. Wow. This entire idea of the Assassin's Creed world and plot is pretty much Jungian inspired.
Ancestral memory. That is that is crazy. I never thought of that.
So it's like you're connected to not even just your ancestral memory, but like all of mankind's collective unconscious.
Yes. Yeah.
And this was his way of sort of explaining how you get these really similar archetypes within totally different cultures who have similar myths in their their history or mythology or whatever. Like Noah's flood is common in many different cultures.
Noah's flood is common in, of course, the Middle East and that area, but it's also, there's stories about it in China, there's stories about it in America, which is like
the Native Americans.
Tens of thousands of years. Yeah, Native Americans. Right. Tens of thousands of years separation from each other, yet still developed this mythology that is very similar to each other.
Right.
And so it's like their thinking must be aligned to something that is similar. Exactly. Right. I'm just trying to not use that word again to describe it. Yes. Exactly. But it's true. All over the world, even the most isolated civilizations have similar mythology despite not being in contact.
Yeah. And this was also his way of explaining like the fact that there's a lot of animal behavior that you can observe where it's like there's no way that was learned.
Yes,
that animal was not taught to do that.
Yeah,
they
it's
just
instinctually
know to do this.
Yep.
There's like certain things they've observed in moths, but it's like there's a lot of examples where animals are born just knowing how to do things and they were not taught. They did not observe a parent or someone else doing it. They just know how to do it. And so I think there's a term called like tabula rasa or something like that. Anyways, it's a whole idea that Jung was kind of against that, which is that it's the nature-nurture argument in science. Is this something that's by nature, by instinct, genetically, they inherit this? Or is it something nurtured, they're taught? This is a behavior that develops because of the circumstances in which the organism or the person is in, and they learn this behavior. Right. So there's always debates on those things.
So Jung would say there is a large amount of the collective unconscious that cannot be removed. It is always there. It will always be there.
Yes.
And it's like we have evolved to be this way, and this is how it is.
Right.
A big problem for, certain ideas that people have with humanity's progress into the future, this is something that they will have to contend with.
Yes.
Which is humans' baser instincts, but not just the instincts, the way that we all kind of want certain things. We all want, like the last podcast, or I think maybe 2 podcasts ago, you mentioned something about how, like, you have a bunch of kids, you eventually get to 8 billion people on the planet, and it's like, okay, at some point, you can't just keep having kids because you're going to have 25 billion, 30, 100 billion people. And if we colonize the stars, it's like, okay, fine. There are ways out of the problem. I'm not saying it's impossible, but at some point it's like, okay, but you have to overcome this. You have to overcome the collective unconscious if you want to convince everyone to stop having kids or something like that, or to have less kids or something like that. At the moment, it happens through like technology, but yeah, this is seen as an obstacle, but I choose not to see it that way.
Okay, so we talked about the genetically inherited part of it, but that can shape personal experience. According to Jung's teachings, the collective unconscious is common to all human beings and is responsible for a number of deep-seated beliefs and instincts, such as spirituality, sexual behavior, and the life and death instinct. Now, part of this was influenced by an experience he had as a boy. I found this really fascinating. So I'm just going to read, I just kind of copied it over from another source, but it says, as a boy, he carved a tiny mannequin into the end of a wooden ruler from his pencil case and placed it inside the case. He added a stone, which he had painted into upper and lower halves, and hid the case in the attic. Periodically, he would return to the mannequin, often bringing tiny sheets of paper with messages inscribed on them in his own secret language. He later reflected that this ceremonial act brought him a feeling of inner peace and security. So he just did this. He just found himself carving a little mannequin into his ruler and putting it in a case, and he put a little rock in there, and he painted the rock, and he'd come like bring messages to the mannequin that he had carved. It's like an idol. He basically created an idol.
He created a thing that he could offer
things
messages,
in this language he invented.
That would possibly do something for him back, I suppose.
And he said that this act brought him, this ceremony, it brought him like inner feelings of peace and security. And then, years later, he discovered similarities between his personal experience and the practices associated with totems of within indigenous cultures. Such as the collection of soul stones. So
that's true. People like to find a nice, smooth, shiny rock, and that's their rock, and they have it. It's theirs, and they keep it.
So he concluded that his intuitive ceremonial act was an unconscious ritual, which he had practiced in a way that was strikingly similar to those in distant locations which he, as a young boy, knew nothing about. So, again, just because we're bringing up this stuff and talking about it does not mean we espouse the same ideas personally, right? Like there's
or
a lot
it doesn't
of things,
mean that this was a scientific experiment with a control variable and that it was properly done.
Not very empirical.
It's anecdotal.
And I don't agree with many things, that Jung taught in theories. But I do think that there's a lot of value, as I'm doing this research and as I'm remembering from the psychology classes I took in college and stuff like that, because had I not gone into social media, psychology would have been my second choice.
Okay.
So I've always had a really strong, passionate interest in psychology. Cool. But anyways, I'd stay behind with my professor way after class, just going over the textbook, and I'd already read 3 chapters ahead and talking with him. But so I really find it interesting. But anyways, just trying to make it clear, we don't necessarily believe all the same things he did. It's just interesting within the context of Xenogears and understanding the story of Xenogears to know what Takahashi and Sorya Saga were reading and the ideas that they were borrowing from. So, but I just find Jung a fascinating person, and that story I thought was really cool. So now let's get into the anima and the animus, right? So the anima and the animus are archetypes that are part of the collective unconscious, which is inherited, right? And one represents the feminine, which is the anima, and then one represents the masculine, which is the animus, right? So and you brought this up actually in episode 2 of the podcast, the yin-yang symbol, right?
Oh yes, absolutely, yeah.
So you have in those little circles that are the opposite color within the larger circle, right?
Yes.
So you have the white side with a small circle that's black, and you have the black side with a small white circle in it. The idea here is that each side has a little bit of the other within it.
Within it, yeah.
Okay.
And that's the idea. And that it can't be too great or too small. There needs to be some type of balance. And the reason that line isn't straight is because the divide between the two isn't always so obvious.
Yes.
And there is some of each in the other.
Yes.
So this would be where the idea of the animus being like the circle within the thing, like the bit of the one side within the other, the masculine within the feminine. Whereas the line itself would be more like the aeon idea, which is the conflict between the two, how they both occupy, but they're kind of, it's not a straight line. It's not so obvious.
It's not so obvious or clear where the divide is.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
But it's there, and then you skip the divide to some circle, but they're proportionate.
I'm glad you
there
brought
needs to
this
be
up.
a proportionate amount of each, otherwise the system kind of doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because I think this is another important thing to use as some kind of precursor to this, right? So, like, Jung was talking about this stuff, geez, what, 70, 100 years ago or whatever.
And some of this was written in the 30s.
So, this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
Obviously, in at least Western society at the time, the way that they viewed like binary genders is very different than how we do today.
Sure.
So, but I don't want you to, let's say, to throw everything Jung is suggesting here out the window based on the fact that today
if it doesn't align with
we have a more of a sliding scale for like gender identity and not so much a binary look at it, right? Don't throw it out.
Jung would not love that.
Don't throw it out. Don't throw it out because Jung even suggesting in the culture of his time that a man or woman has part of a feminine or masculine in
within
them
each other
was kind of a radical idea at the time itself.
In the West, yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty progressive for the time. Obviously,
I would say probably
things have changed since then, but
the yin and the yang has been around in the East for so long.
Right, and that's why I want to.
But in the West, it was a different.
That's why I want to make sure and clarify in Western culture of that particular time period.
In that particular time period, Nazi Germany basically
is thousands of years, obviously. So the yin yang symbol's been way older than that. But my point in bringing this up is like I still think some of this stuff can be useful or interesting, or that you can apply it to, kind of where you're at in your own development in life, right? I think some of these ideas are still useful, but don't just throw it out because, binary gender.
Oh, he's backwards.
Right, like you could say, when he's talking about men needing to develop the anima or the inner female opposite, right?
Right.
You could also see that as a masculine woman or whatever, right? Like it can apply both ways, or you could say that there's like a sliding scale. Most people are probably a little polar in terms of like I identify more to this side or I identify more to this side, but like you're saying that yin-yang symbol line,
it's not a straight line.
It's not straight.
There is conflict. They're constantly pushing each other in different areas. And if you imagine these circles kind of pushing with their influence a little bit, it would have that exact effect. If this one starts pushing here, this one pushes here, and before you know it, you've got that shape.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. So there's not like a defining line here that we need to ascribe or whatever. But wherever you fall on that sliding scale, it's important to know that the inner opposite is an important thing to develop. That's the theory of Jung.
Yes.
So wherever you fall on that scale, develop the inner opposite to become a mature, fully developed ego. Is the point.
It is difficult to do philosophy without any boundaries.
Sure.
It's difficult to philosophize about anything. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm sure many people have done it, but it's difficult, especially 100 years ago, which is what this game's based on, for people to philosophize on things without having any definition to those things. And definitions are boundaries.
Yeah. So like yin and yang.
They're rules.
I'll probably put this on the screen.
Yeah.
We have yin and yang here. Right? Like the characteristics of the masculine and the feminine.
Yes.
So in the masculine, you have external, doing, purpose, goal setting, enacting an agenda on the world, personal agency or autonomy, rationality, logic or intellect, word for that being logos. Individuality, transformation and change, stoicism, analytical, prowess and discernment, direction and commitment. On the yin side, the feminine side, you have internal, being, and these are kind of opposites, right?
Being as opposed to doing.
Right, being as opposed to doing, internal as opposed to external. Awareness of the present moment, connection to the unconscious, embracing paradox and cognitive dissonance, exploring the mysterious and non-rational. Eros.
Notice there, this is important, by the way. It doesn't say irrational.
Yes.
Because, and this is in connection with the personal agency and autonomy. I would say it was actually probably more rationality. Yeah. So the male is rational. The female is not. You would think the opposite of rational is irrational. It's not. Right. It's non-rational. There's actually a very important distinction.
Yes.
Because irrational means it is completely void of rationality. Right?
Yes.
Non-rationality means it's just not rational. Like what words I choose, I may not have rationality behind which words I necessarily
choose. Intuitive,
it's more just, it's not irrational.
Yes.
It's just not rational, right? Like there are certain, like with religion, there's a lot of elements within religion that are considered non-rational, not irrational. They're just not rational. But, you know.
Because it's a connection to the unconscious.
Exactly.
It's embracing paradox.
Exactly,
it's
and mystery, and
there's things that you can't explain.
Dissonance. Exactly.
And exploring how you feel about that, and
that leads you to a non-rational explanation, not irrational. I know that some people might not love that the feminine is not categorized by rationality, but it's not irrationality; it's non-rationality, which is different and a whole different thing altogether.
Right, and again, if we're talking about sort of like modern gender theory. Feminine does not have to mean woman, and masculine does not have to mean man. But,
That's true.
But defining these things as the masculine and the feminine, so that we know feminine, this is the things represented there.
Yeah.
You will have parts of both in you.
Exactly,
anyways.
within, yes.
And that the whole point of this is that you're learning how to develop the inner opposite, whatever you identify as.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So, anyways.
Yeah, keep going then.
Exploring the mysterious or non-rational. Eros, nurturing and caring. Eros being the opposite of logos, I think.
Oh, well, Eros is more like heart. It's more like love. It's whereas,
Number 8, connection to wisdom. 9, emotional intelligence. 10, unconditional love. 11, respect for the earth and its creatures. And 12, dark, mysterious stillness. Yeah. So that's kind of like some of the traits of the masculine and the feminine, or the yin and the yang.
Yeah.
And if you are a man, or say masculine woman, or you identify stronger with the masculine, right? It's important that you develop your inner opposite, which would be feminine as well. Those traits of the feminine are also important to develop. That little black circle and the white.
The little black circle. The idea, if you focus on that circle too much, it grows too big, it overtakes the whole, and you end up with an imbalance again.
Right.
So you need to, it's like the 80-20 rule.
What's called an anima possession, or an animus possession, as Jung would put it, if you do that, right? If you don't develop it correctly.
That just throws off balance.
Right. Integrate is the word that he used. So he believed that it was vital for every person to integrate that feminine or masculine side and not repress them away, right? Because if you do that, otherwise, if you were to repress them, they're going to become a part of your shadow. And they're going to get projected onto other people, particularly your opposite gender, in really negative ways.
Sure, yeah.
So if you're a man who represses your feminine side, the way that you treat women will not be very good.
I think that's
right. Like you won't understand femininity. You will treat women as objects. You won't be able to communicate with them. It's not good to repress your inner opposite, because the way that you treat women will be really bad. The flip side of that is true as also. A healthy ego requires this integration of your inner opposite. And when the anima or animus becomes fully integrated, that part of you, that little black circle or white circle, actually acts as a mediator between your conscious and your unconscious mind. So you're able to sort of access this unconscious and have peace with it, and become inspired and
possibly have some more control.
More wisdom.
Well. Yeah, sure.
You develop wisdom, right? That you become like a fully matured, complete and whole person.
Wisdom specifically, for men, wisdom is often symbolized by the feminine, and I think you read it on the list with the yin and yang.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, like the name Sophia, something we're going to talk about later, but
Yes.
Sophia means wisdom, and Sophia being like a Greek goddess, the goddess of wisdom. Also, the Triforce of wisdom is held by Zelda. The idea that the feminine is in control of wisdom is like well, it's part of this whole thing. That
Yes.
to access wisdom means to access, the feminine side if you're a male.
So you're right on cue, because the 4 stages of anima development. So someone who identifies more predominantly in the masculine, right? You have the anima, the black dot in the white. There are 4 stages to developing that anima. The first stage is Eve, right? It says the first is Eve, named for the Genesis account of Adam and Eve. It deals with the emergence of the male's object of desire, yet simultaneously generalizes all females as evil and powerless. The second stage of development is Helen. It's an allusion to Helen of Troy in Greek mythology. In this phase, women are viewed as capable of worldly success and of being self-reliant, intelligent, and insightful, even if not altogether virtuous. This second phase is meant to show a strong schism in external talents, okay? Lacking internal qualities. Mary is the third stage, and in this phase, named after the Christian theological understanding of the Virgin Mary, which is Jesus' mother, at this level, females can now seem to possess virtue by the perceiving male, even if it's like a strongly dogmatic or esoteric way, right? It's not like totally complete, but anyways, you're starting to get there. Insomuch as certain activities deemed consciously unvirtuous cannot be applied to her. And the 4th stage is Sophia.
Right on
Right?
cue.
Sophia is the final, complete development of the anima.
Yeah.
Right? The 4th and final phase of anima development is Sophia, named for the Greek word for wisdom. Complete integration.
It's actually where philosophy comes from.
Yeah.
So philo, meaning love for, something like that, and then S-O-P-H-Y, Sophy, is Sophia, so love of wisdom is philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. So complete integration has now occurred, which allows females to be seen and related to as particular individuals who possess both positive and negative qualities. The most important aspect of this final level is that as the personification wisdom suggests, the anima is now developed enough that no single object can fully and permanently contain the images to which it is related. So, the reason we wanted to bring all that up, about the anima and the animus, the balance between the two sides, and particularly with the inner opposite, and Sophia being this sort of like fully integrated anima, our main character here is Faye, he's a man. So, developing the anima is important to psychological wholeness for the character. We're going to be introduced here to an ancient character named Sophia, who is the mother of the
Just
Nisan.
so happens.
The mother of the Nisan church. She established the whole church.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not that long ago either, right?
500 years.
500 years?
Yeah. So we'll get to that in a minute. But now that we've laid down all of that context, let's go through some of the dialogue as they're looking at this statue of a male and a female angel figures, each with one wing. So Margie says, "Did you notice that the 2 great angels only have one wing each? According to a legend handed down in Nisan, God could have created humans perfectly, but then humans would not have helped each other. So that is what these great single-winged angels symbolize. In order to fly, they are dependent on one another." Very important. I'm going to let that sit with you, the audience. I'm not going to continue elaborating on that until we get more of this as we go. Okay. But based on everything we've talked about, just contemplate on that, what Margie says there, right? Okay. Citan says in response to that, so that is the reason for it. I see. On further inspection, the left angel looks somewhat masculine, while the right one looks somewhat feminine. Now that is an unusual feature, is it not? Usually these depictions are not gender specific, but these angels are clearly distinguishable as having opposite genders, and the space between them is the path from which God advents, or from where God advents.
Where he comes into being, yeah.
Or it could be the path leading to God? Well, I don't know. It could be either, or even both. Now I see. This all coincides with the teachings of Nisan. Again, I'm going to let that sit with you. But I just love it. I just love it when you have the context. It really starts to come together a little bit.
Yeah, something here. It's not just light in between them. There's actually, I believe, am I wrong in saying there's a fire? There was a fire kind of on a torch in between the two of them?
So so we get these
These
candles.
Are beautiful
Yeah,
shots,
you're right. I
by
think
the way.
there is a fire
Yeah, I think there's a flame in between
the two. You're right. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, so there's a fire in between the two of them. Okay, so I want to speak on that somewhat.
Okay. Yeah.
So the fire in between the two of them, it's not just light, it's actually a physical thing. It's an object. And they say fire was man's first piece of technology, the Promethean kind of idea. And it's fire is like the emergence of man's ability to become like God. That's where it all started, right? So God is there. But there is, Citan's leaving one out. He says the space between is the path from where God advents, meaning that's where he comes into being, is in between. Or it's the pathway to God, the pathway in between them to God is in between both. But looking at this in a little bit different way, it's actually, the fire also could be an obstacle in between the two of them, right?
Sure.
So that there is something keeping them from meeting together. Okay, I just want to throw that out there as a possible idea.
Sure. Okay, so Margie says, "Why, Dr. Saitanizuki, you are an amusing fellow."
Yeah, he was talking to himself that whole time. He was just going on, just all.
This
So
is,
exciting.
"Oh, excuse me, it's a habit of mine." And Faye says, "Doc knows a lot about a lot of things. Sometimes I can't even understand what he's talking about." I remember when I was playing, I was like, "You never understand what he's freaking talking about, Faye. You're always confused."
Poor Faye.
Bart says, forcing them to fly together, it would be less bothersome if they could just fly on their own, don't you think, Faye?
As if reducing bother is God's point. It's I want less bother.
Well, Bart might be repressing his anima a little bit
Oh
with that
yes,
sentence.
definitely.
Right?
Yes.
So Bart is taking the idea of you need men and women
Together
the female,
to
the masculine and the feminine together to find the path to God.
Yes.
Right? Or the path to wholeness.
Mm-hmm. And he's like,
and Bart's like,
what a bother.
Fly together. Wouldn't it be better if you just fly on your own? Don't you think so, Faye? Right?
You're missing the point.
He's repressing his anima a little
Yes,
bit there,
yes.
I feel. Margie says, "Bart, you missed the deeper meaning and the beauty of it. Someday I wish I could be of help to someone like that." "Oh, we haven't visited the room of Sophia yet, have we? You're really supposed to go through some procedures before you can see it, but
No.
this time I think it'll be all right if I make a special exception."
They always make exceptions for Faye, always. Remember when the Alice is getting married and they're like, usually we don't let men in to see, but here you right this way, Faye.
We'll let you do it. Yeah.
He always gets these exceptions. And this exception, I don't think is very likely. I don't take this to be very likely.
Margie is
an exception.
Margie is the mother
That's
of the
true.
Nisan church.
That's
and
true.
So she can kind of just make decisions like
But
this.
you know
I would
how
think.
we look at this and we're like, geopolitically, this makes sense. This makes sense why these countries would be competing for resources in this way, and the water in the desert, and unearthing the gears, and the geopolitical landscape of Nisan trying to be neutral, but there's a war going on right next to them. It makes sense. It all comes together and makes sense. To have this ancient religion and the head of it be like, Holy of Holies, right this way, you uninitiated fellow. I don't care.
If it was
you
a
should.
teenager
Nobody
who's
cares.
in charge,
Nobody cares. Okay,
maybe.
she's young. I guess so. I guess that's a good point.
maybe Sister Agnes wouldn't have been into it.
Sister
but-
Agnes would definitely not have done this. I don't think any religious leader would have ever done this, given and that's, I kind of said it right there, but this is essentially the Holy of Holies. And she says you're supposed to go through some procedures before you can see it, meaning you are supposed to cleanse yourself and all this stuff. Typically, I would assume that you would have to be a believer of the religion might be the first prerequisite.
Right.
Anyways, right up we go.
So Margie says Sophia is revered as the founding mother of the Nisan nation and the founder of the Nisan religion, who set forth its teachings. There's a special room upstairs that has a portrait of Mother Sophia in it.
Yeah.
And Citan's like, "Oh, we'd definitely like to view that, Faye. Let's go have a look at it." He really wants Faye to see this painting.
of a woman.
Citan always knows what he's doing. He always knows what he's doing. Nothing is a coincidence. Nothing is happenstance. Citan knows what he's doing.
I suppose
He wants Faye to look at that painting. And so they go in, and Citan says, "Oh, what an exquisite portrait. And the beautiful young lady portrayed is quite beyond comparison, too. What's more, this looks rather familiar. What do you think, Faye?"
Uh-huh.
Faye says, "Yes, I was just thinking the same thing. The hair is a different color." Actually, it doesn't really look like it's a different color. I don't know why he thinks it's a different color. Maybe I need to look at it again, but I think it's
She
orange
has, like,
hair in both.
I thought she had like more brownish hair. It was just
Let's
kind of
take a look
sepia
at-
toned. The
let's take
painting
a look
was
at
kind of
the-
old.
Okay, Sophia paintings, Xenogears. I
It just-
thought her hair was orange in the painting too. Maybe it's brown.
Yeah, it's
but
like
it
brownish.
looks orange to me.
Yeah, and he's comparing it to Elly, right?
What happened?
Oh.
I want to see it up close.
You're right, but I would.
It looks. I mean, this color
It looks
of
that
Elly's portrait and this color of Sophia, that looks like the same color hair to me. Am I
Okay.
crazy? Am I
Okay,
colorblind?
It's close. It's close.
That looks like
I would
the
have
same
called
color.
Sophia brunette, whereas Elly's red, but it's like really not that different, I guess.
I thought it looked the same. If I'm colorblind, audience, let me know. But apparently, Faye seems to think that
They're
the hair
quite
color is
different.
different, but that she looks a lot like Elly, right? So, anyways, he says the hair is a different color, but the atmosphere or personality about her is exactly the same. And Citan's like, "What? Hair color? What do you mean?" He has to know what he means, but yeah. Faye says, "What do I mean? Look, it's the girl I met in the forest. It's Elly. I mean, there's something about her that's just like Elly, don't you think so?" And Citan says, "Yes, now that you mention it, she does resemble Elly. But that's not what I was talking about. I meant that the brush techniques and overall style used in this picture is similar to yours." So the painting style of the mother of the Nisan sect is painted in a style that Faye paints in. And Faye says, "Really?" And Faye does it. "First of all, I'm nowhere near as good an artist, right?" And Citan says, "No, it is very," he's like insisting, "Nope,
He's telling
it is
him.
very
He's
similar
not
to your
asking,
style."
he's telling us.
It's very similar to your style, but somehow I can sense an atmosphere of sadness in this picture. She's smiling, but in a way gives the impression that she's anxious. Perhaps the picture is reflecting her inner self, or perhaps it's the inner feelings of the artist being conveyed. If you look closely, you will notice that the painting is not completely finished. The artist put his brush down when it was near completion. Why is that? Let's take a look at the painting real quick, because you can kind of see that in the corner, right? You can see it's not quite finished down here.
Yeah, in the bottom right, yeah.
But, and notice anything about this?
She's got a cross necklace.
That is the same pendant that Faye saw in Lahan, and that
Sure.
in
I
the
see that.
cutscene when it was like
In the desert.
in the desert,
Yeah.
right? That Elly
It's there,
was
and
wearing.
then you see the woman. So this could be
Could be
the woman.
her. At least as far as we know at this point. We don't know for sure. But she has that pendant. And
Very interesting.
Citan is strongly suggesting that Faye had something to do with painting this.
See, I don't know what to make of this at all.
Just keep it in mind.
Now, if this is like some
Now,
sci-fi
in the
stories,
middle,
there's time travel involved.
In the middle of this, there is a flash because when they're leaving, they're
he
leaving
sees
the room.
something. Yeah.
Faye turns around and looks at it again, and then it flashes, and it shows, as far as we can tell, Faye
Himself
wearing the same clothes,
wearing the same clothes,
painting
same hair.
the thing,
Yeah.
and Sophia sitting in a chair,
Yeah.
and she says Lacan. She
Yes.
says Lacan, and then it cuts away.
Lacan was another famous.
Yes, that's another reference to
psychologist.
Jacques Lacan.
Yes.
We'll get into him more in another episode.
Okay.
That would be another hour. of
Also
time
similar
talking
to
about
the
Lacan.
town of Lahan.
Yeah, the name Lahan for the
Yeah.
town, yeah, for the village in the beginning.
So that's interesting.
So, but she calls him Lacan.
Okay. Don't know what to make of that.
And then you leave that room.
Wait, hold on, because we talked about the red-haired dude anyways, all right.
Oh, you mean the red-haired warrior who beats up the kids?
Yes, and how I was. So in phase past, we've got a red-haired person. We have his childhood self, but then we also have like an adult person that we're seeing now that he has memories of. That is him, but in a different. There's lots of things in his head, I suppose. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, don't have anything to actually say. I'm just trying to
let me just go through the rest of this dialogue, and I actually
Okay.
think we're probably going to cut the episode here because we've been going on a long time, and there's
Okay.
still a lot more to talk about. Okay. Margie says, I don't know, but my grandmother might have known about it. Oh, what if we ask Agnes? She may know something. All right, then. I'll be with Sister Agnes. And then Bart says, well, shall we head back to the town for now? And Citan is like, all right, but he wants to talk to Agnes first. He's like, can I speak to her before going back to town? Bart says, yeah, that's fine. We'll stop in her room on the way out. And then Citan says, is something wrong, Faye? Because Faye looks at it and has that vision of painting.
Yeah.
Right. You look like you're daydreaming. And Faye says, no, it's nothing. And then they go down and talk to Sister Agnes, and she has a couple of interesting anecdotes here. Anecdotes? What's the word? Antidote is different from
Anecdote.
Anecdote.
Yeah,
I'm thinking
anecdote.
of the word anecdote.
Yes. Anecdote.
Sister Agnes says, I understand you were shown Sophia's portrait. Who knows how she feels about that, because there's supposed to be protocol before going in there.
Yeah.
The lady portrayed in that picture is Nisan's great founding mother. Some say that it was painted at least 500 years ago.
At least.
So, it was painted 500 years ago, but Faye was painting it. What's going on with that?
Yeah, that's
Citan
crazy.
says 500 years ago. Now that is quite amazing. Personally, I find it intriguing. Do you have the historical material from that period? Or any historical material from that period? He's looking to see if they have any records.
Yeah.
Now, remember, ethos pretty closely controls the
Yeah, what's the religion of Nisan's relationship with the religion of Ethos?
different things.
They're separate, right?
Yes.
Because I noticed Nisan is it's all women as far as I can tell. It's founded on worshiping a goddess, a female goddess. There's a bunch of nun-looking women. The leader currently is a girl.
Yeah, it's like a
Margie.
matriarchal
Yeah,
kind
it
of,
seems like.
structure.
Whereas the Ethos, I think one person was called a cardinal, and we've only seen men
I'm pretty sure
represent
the ethos has a different, because that symbol for Nisan you saw there was
the cross?
the cross pendant.
Oh, okay.
And ethos has a different one. I'll put this on the screen for people to look at. Ethos has this as their symbol.
Oh. I don't recall seeing that.
Okay,
That's very
so
interesting.
this says Nisan is a country, but there's also, I don't want to read this out loud in case there's spoilers in it, so hold on.
Okay, don't worry. Look away.
Anyways, yes, they're different things. We'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
Okay, but Ethos controls most of the records, so he's trying to find out, do you have any records about the founding of Nisan 500 years ago, right? Sister Agnes says, in our hands, there are no such records left intact. All records and materials concerning Sophia have been lost. The portrait is the only thing left. We too do not have much knowledge about her. Citan says, that's too bad. So there really is nothing left at all? And Sister Agnes says, for someone who has helped Margaret, I would have loved to share them, but unfortunately I am unable to help here. Citan says, oh well, none the matter. Please don't worry about it. I was just inquiring. But it does seem somewhat strange if such a majestic building as this survived history, then it is likely a scroll or two would remain too.
Right.
Sister Agnes says, according to tradition, Sophia was present about 500 years ago. She sacrificed herself for the people and has been summoned to be with God. That's all I can tell you. Citan says, I see. So everything was lost in the darkness of history. Okay. So there's so much that has happened here.
Well,
I'm going to try to recap the important things to try to remember as you continue to play. Aside from all the anima philosophical side of it
Right.
that is related to the theme, right? Sophia was the founder of Nisan. She looks exactly like Elly, and she has the little pendant that makes Faye go crazy.
It hypnotizes, yeah.
He loses it when he, it's the swinging pendulum thing. And apparently Faye painted this painting of Sophia, who lived 500 years ago, and they have no records about her other than she sacrificed herself.
And even weirder, Citan knows all this. So.
And Citan is probing Faye to look at it. He really wants him to see this, and he wants him to think about it hard.
Now, I'm thinking about this maybe too heavily from a religious perspective, given like I'm trying to find the religious principles of Nisan here.
Yeah.
I find it odd that the Holy of Holies is dedicated to the founder and not to God, when the religion acknowledges God, saying God called Mother Sophia back to be with him or her, I suppose. But the religion has a Holy of Holies, which is the most sacred part, dedicated to her, not the higher being that called her, right? That religiously, just given general religion theory, if that's even a thing, that doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't seem very.
Nisan is separate from the ethos.
Right.
Right. What the ethos considers God.
Oh, right. I guess that's probably the part I'm missing. Whatever Nisan considers to be God, they've let it be known that it's separate from this woman that they worship.
Yeah, so they don't worship Sophia as God, but Sophia was the founding mother.
But I was so...
And the path to God in the Nisan sect is for men and women,
the process
the balance of the feminine and the masculine.
That makes sense, but the Holy of Holies containing nothing but a portrait of a person and no clear signifier of any...
What God is.
God type, is just, I found that to be a little interesting.
Keep your thought on that. Like, remember that and just keep it in mind as you keep playing. Okay, we're gonna stop there.
Cool.
For this episode, because I think we've been going for we're coming up on an hour and a half, 2 hours, and we've got a lot more to talk about still. So we're gonna switch over. We're gonna record it now, but I'm gonna have to split this into two.
Okay.
So thank you for watching. Appreciate all of you out there in the audience. Hit us up in the comments with any of your insight. Kaysen has been avoiding the comment section a little bit.
Yeah, I actually didn't read it for this last video at all.
Avoiding spoilers in the comment section. I'm looking at them and keeping tabs on some things because people have been mentioning some things that I want to talk about, but not yet. So, for instance, people are talking about like Citan's name maybe having some similarities to Citan or Satan.
Interesting.
So
Citan. Okay.
I don't want to address that at this moment. I want to address it down the line more. Okay. So if I'm not responding to comments, don't get discouraged. There are certain ones I'm saving to respond to later. But there are a couple things we've missed, like I don't know how. I had it in my freaking notes and everything. I forgot to mention the Luca cameo in Lahan, Luca from Chrono Trigger. Literally, the character Luca from Chrono Trigger is in Lahan Village. And I was just like, I had it in my notes, I just skipped over it by accident. But anyways, I'm seeing these comments, I will address them. Okay. But there are certain ones that I don't want to hit now because we need to hit them when there's a more revealed or when it's more relevant or something like that. Okay. So we'll get to it. But thank you for watching. We'll see you again next week. Peace out.